Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. Happy weekend. Can't really say Friday, can't really say Saturday, because there's just too many people spread across the world for me to know which one it is for you, so just happy weekend. If you can't tell, I'm kind of tired. But I want to try and sit down and read the remainder of these Danish fairy tales to you. I believe that this might be the last time I read from it. There are 2 remaining fairy tales, and one is fairly short, and the other looks to be exceptionally short, so I'm hoping that if I can get through the one, I can get myself to get through the other. Let's see if my hopes and dreams turn to reality. This first one is called The Dreams. There was once a peasant whom everybody knew as the rich Peter Larsen, and he was the richest man in the whole district. But he was wicked, proud, and hard-hearted. He had only one child, a daughter, whose name was Karen. In the same region there lived a poor peasant who had an only son, called Hans. The children had played and gone to school together, and loved each other from their earliest childhood. When they were grown, Hans went to the house of the rich Peter Larsen one day and told him that he loved his daughter, and that she loved him, and that he had come to ask Larsen whether he would let them marry. That made the rich farmer furious, and he struck Hans a terrible blow, and then said, "Yes, you may have her, but first you must go to the end of the world. Then you may have her when you return." "I will try," said Hans, and went home to his mother, and told her that he could have Karen if he would go to the end of the world, and said that he had made up his mind to start at once. Then his mother began to weep and begged him not to leave her, but her tears and her entreaties were of no avail, for Hans was determined to go. So she gave him a knapsack, and put in some food and a few clothes, and Hans started out on his journey. He went straight before him, for in that way he would have to come to the end of the world. But as long as he had some food in his knapsack, Hans would not turn in anywhere, for he wanted to go as fast as he could. At last a day came when there was not a crumb left in his sack, and he had to stop at a large farm to beg for something to eat. The man to whom the farm belonged asked Hans where he was going, and the young man replied, "I must go to the end of the world, for otherwise I cannot win the daughter of the rich Peter Larsen." If you are going to the end of the world, I wish you would do something for me. Find out for me why it is that, although I have 3 beautiful daughters, and am rich enough to give a large dowry with each one, I can find no suitor for them." "I will do that if it's in my power," said Hans, and the farmer filled his sack with food, and again Hans went straight before him, as long as he had a piece of bread. When his knapsack was empty, the young man had to stop at a large farm for a bite to eat. "How far are you going?" asked the owner. "I am going to the end of the world," answered Hans, "for otherwise I cannot win the daughter of the rich Peter Larsen." "If you are going to the end of the world," said the farmer, "you must do a commission for me. You must find out for me why it is that a tree in my garden has red leaves on one side and white ones on the other, and has never borne any fruit." Hans promised to try to learn the answer to this question, and the peasant filled his knapsack with food, and Hans went on until he again had to stop for food. This time he entered a royal palace, and and told his story to the king himself, who questioned him and asked him to find out where his daughter was, who had been stolen 7 years ago. "I'll see what I can do," said Hans, "and if it is possible, I will let you know." Then he went on with his full knapsack, till he came to a forest, in the midst of which stood a sentry box, and near it there was an old soldier on guard. He called to Hans, and asked him where he was going. Hans told him where and why, and also asked whether he had much farther to go. "Not very far," said the old man. "You will soon reach a large body of water. That is the Red Sea, and on the other side of it is the castle that stands at the end of the world, but a wicked wizard lives in it." "I do not care who lives there," said Hans, "but I must and will go there." "Then you can do me a favor," said the old soldier, "and find out for me when I shall be relieved, for I have been on duty for 400 years. Hans promised to do so, and hastened on, and soon he was on the shore of the Red Sea. There he saw an old woman who had a little boat in which she carried people across the sea. "Where do you want to go?" she asked. "I want to go to the end of the world," answered Hans. "You'll get there soon enough," said the old woman, "for you will never come back again." "Oh, yes," said Hans, "for I must go back home to marry the daughter of the rich Peter Larsen." "Very well," said the woman, "I will ferry you across, and if you can return you can tell me how much longer I must stay here paddling around in the water. I've been here for 700 years." "I will try to find out for you," said Hans, and the woman took him across the Red Sea to the castle at the end of the world. He knocked at the gate, and a young woman who was a princess came and opened it, for she was the only one at home then. Hans bade her good evening, and asked whether he could stay all night. "No," said the princess. "What do you want here? If you should once enter, you would never cross the threshold alive again." "But I must enter," said Hans, "for otherwise I cannot marry the rich Peter Larsen's daughter, Karen." "Well," said the princess, "the wizard is not at home now, but if he returns and smells the blood of a Christian, he will kill you." But Hans insisted that he must see the wizard, because, besides wanting to marry Karen, he had been entrusted with many commissions, and then he told the maiden about the information that he had to secure. When he told the princess about the king who wanted to know where his daughter was, she burst into tears, and said that that must certainly be her father. "Come in," she said, "and I will try to help you. I shall change you into a brush, and put you on a table that stands near my bed, and when I say, 'Brush, pay attention,' you must note carefully what is said." The princess changed Hans into a brush, and soon after that the horseman came home. He cried, "I smell the blood of a Christian." "Oh, no, father," said the princess, "you are mistaken. Today a carrion crow flew over the palace, and dropped some human flesh that he had torn from the body of a man drowned in the Red Sea. That is what you smell." The wizard was satisfied, and sat down to his dinner, and soon afterward he and the princess went to bed, as they were both tired. In a short time she began to snore so loud that the wizard awoke and came to her room. He woke her and asked why she snored so loud. "Oh, I dreamed something." "What was your dream?" "I dreamed of a man who had 3 beautiful daughters whom nobody would marry, although he would give to each a rich dowry. Why is that?" "I know," said the wizard, "but he never will. If he would let one part of the door open inward and the other part open outward, several suitors would come every day." "Brush, pay attention to that," said the princess. "Why did you say that?" asked the wizard. "Oh, I was half asleep when I said it," she answered. Then they went back to sleep again, but presently the princess again wakened the wizard with her snoring, and he asked her what she had dreamed this time. "I dreamed of a landowner who has a tree in his garden that has white leaves on one side and red ones on the other, and that has never yet borne fruit. How does that happen?" "If 4 of his servants dig on one side and 4 on the other, he will find a barrel of gold and a barrel of silver." After a time the same thing happened again, and this time the princess said that she had dreamed of a king whose only daughter had been stolen 7 years ago. "You are the princess!" screamed the wizard in such a rage that the poor young woman feared for her life, and for a time was afraid to ask any more questions. After having allowed him to sleep in peace for a time, the princess again began to snore, and the wizard came grumbling to find out what dream was troubling her now. "I am just as unhappy about my dreams as you are," said she, "but I really cannot help them. This time I dreamed about an old soldier who is standing guard in a dense forest where he has been for many 100 years. How much longer will he have to stay there?" "I know, but he never will. In order to be relieved, he must, when he hears a rushing sound in the air, call out, 'Hear me, Satan, who art flying and hovering in the air. Come down and relieve me. I have been standing here for many a year. Now thou shalt stand here in my place for all eternity.' Then I should have to descend and stand guard in his place." Once more the wizard was awakened by the snoring of the princess, who told him that she had dreamed about an old woman who lived on the shore of the Red Sea, and who wanted to know how much longer she would have to stay there. If she could seize a Christian and break his neck, and then suck 3 drops of his blood, she could go where she wanted. And now see that you do not have any more dreams, or I will break your neck." Thereupon he fell into a deep sleep, and snored so that the whole castle trembled. The next morning the wizard got up and went away after breakfast. Then the princess changed Hans into his original form, gave him his breakfast, and told him to go down to the shore of the Red Sea. She would follow him as soon as the wizard was far enough away. Then she transformed Hans into a little wheel, which rolled down to the shore, where it remained until the princess came herself and changed it into human form. They both jumped into the old woman's boat and told her to ferry them across. "Have you brought me the answer to my question?" she asked. "When we are across you shall have it," said Hans, and when they reached land and were some distance from the woman, Hans called back to her how she could free herself. Then he hurried on with the princess until they came to the sentry box in the woods, and there they stopped long enough to tell the old soldier how to free himself from his guard duty. And even as they stood there they heard a rushing sound in the air. It was the wizard hastening to overtake the fugitives. Then the soldier called out what he had just learned from Hans, and immediately the wicked wizard had to come down and be a sentinel, and there he stands until this day. After bidding goodbye to the old soldier, Hans and the princess journeyed to the court of the king, her father. Hans took her by the hand and led her to the king, saying, "Here is your daughter, who was stolen from you 7 years ago." At first the king would not believe it, but the princess said, "Father, do you not remember that when I was a small child I fell and cut my right hand with a penknife? Here is the scar." Then the king was so happy that he had found his daughter again, that out of gratitude he offered Hans her hand in marriage, and also the half of his kingdom. But Hans thanked him, and said that he must go home to marry Peter Larsen's daughter. Then the king gave him a hogshead of money, and a fine carriage with a coachman and footman, and Hans continued his journey to the estate of the landowner, who had the strange tree in his garden. Hans gave the desired information, and immediately 8 men were commanded to dig, 4 on each side of the tree. And there they found a hogshead of gold on one side and a hogshead of silver on the other. The owner was so glad that he gave Hans half of what had been found, and his servants put it on Hans' carriage. The next stop was at the home of the rich farmer, who could not find suitors for his 3 beautiful daughters. Hans told him how he could remedy that difficulty, and the grateful man wanted to give one of his daughters with a rich dowry to the young man, but he thanked him and told him that he was already engaged. Now Hans went straight to the house of his parents. His fine carriage stopped in front of the door, and he sent one of his servants to inquire whether he could spend the night there. His mother, who did not recognize her son, began to weep, and said that he was cruel and heartless thus to mock poor people, for it was evident that they could not accommodate a fine lord in their poor cottage. Then Hans jumped out of his carriage, and throwing his arms around his mother's neck, he cried, "Don't cry, little mother, it is I, your own son, Hans." At first she could hardly believe that it was true, but at last she recognized him, and he sat down and told the story of his adventures, and there was great joy in the little cottage. The next morning Hans drove with his 4 horses and servants to the farm of the rich Peter Larsen. Karen was in the act of feeding the cattle, but of course she looked up when she heard the horses, and as she saw the splendid equipage drive into the courtyard, she was so surprised that she fell over backward with a bundle of hay in her arms. And the rich Peter Larsen also came out, and bowed and scraped most politely. Then said Hans, "Peter Larsen, it is only I, Hans. May I now have your daughter as my wife? I have just returned from the end of the world, and you remember that once you struck me in the face and said that if I went to the end of the world and came back, I might marry Karen." So Hans married Karen, and now they are living happily on the farm of the rich Peter Larsen with their children. I liked that one. That was a good story. I was worried that the writer wasn't going to be able to easily piece together all those questions without it getting monotonous, but they did a really good job. Awesome. I'm going to stop this just for a second so that I don't lose this if my computer freezes or something. And then I will get to the next one. And here we have the last. This story is called The Reward of Good Deeds. There was once a man who went into the woods to cut some firewood. He went from one tree to another, but they were all too good for his purpose, as they would make good timber if allowed to stand. At last he found a tree which seemed good for nothing. It was gnarled and partly decayed, so he began to hew away at it. But just as he began to cut, he heard a voice calling to him, "Help me out, my good man." And as he turned, he saw a large viper that was caught in a cleft of the tree, and could not free itself. "No, I will not help you," said the man, "for you would harm me." But the viper said that would not hurt him, if he would only free it. Then the man put his axe into the cleft under the snake, and so freed it. But hardly was it free when it coiled itself up, hissed, put out its tongue, and prepared to strike him. "Did I not tell you," said the man, "that you are a rascal who would reward good with evil?" "Yes," answered the viper, "you may well say that. So it is in the world, but all good deeds are rewarded with evil." "That is not true," said the man. "Good deeds are rewarded with good." "You will not find anybody to agree with you there," said the viper. "I know better how it goes in the world." "Let us inquire about it," said the man. "Very well," said the viper. So it did not bite him, but went with him through the forest till it came to an old worn-out horse that was grazing. It was lame and blind in one eye, had only a few broken teeth in its mouth. They asked him whether good deeds were rewarded with good or with evil. "They are rewarded with evil," said the horse. "For 20 years I have served my master faithfully. I have carried him on my back and drawn his wagon, and have taken care not to stumble lest he fall. As long as I was young and strong, I had kind treatment. I had a good stall, and plenty of water and food, and was well curried. But now that I am old and weak, I must work on the treadmill the livelong day. I never have a roof to cover me, and all the food I have is what I get for myself. No, indeed, good deeds are rewarded only with evil." "There, now you hear," said the viper. "Now I shall bite you." "Oh, no, wait a moment," said the man. "There comes the fox. Let us ask him for his opinion." The fox came up and stopped and looked at them, for he saw that the man was in serious trouble. Then the viper asked the fox whether good deeds were rewarded with evil or with good. "Say with good," whispered the man, "and I will give you 2 fat geese." Then the fox said, "Good deeds are rewarded with good. And as he said that, he jumped on the viper and bit its neck so that it fell to the ground. But as it was dying, it insisted, "No, good deeds are rewarded with evil that I have experienced, I who spared the man's life, who has now cheated me out of mine." Now the viper was dead, and the man was free. Then he said to the fox, "Come home with me, and get your geese." "No, I thank you," said the fox. "I will not go to town, for there the dogs would get me." "Then wait here until I come with the geese," said the man. He ran home, and said to his wife, "Hasten and put 2 fat geese into a sack, for I have promised them to the fox for his breakfast today." The woman took a sack and put something into it, but it was not geese she put in, but 2 fierce dogs. The man then ran out with the bag to the fox and said, "Here you have your reward." "Thank you," said the fox. "Then it was not a lie after all, what I said first, that good deeds are rewarded with good." Then taking the bag on his back, he ran off into the woods. "That sack is heavy," said the fox, so he sat down and tore it open with his sharp teeth. But as he did so, the 2 dogs leaped from the bag and fixed their teeth in his throat. There was no escape from them, so he was bitten to death, but not until he had said, "No, what I said first was a lie after all. Good deeds are rewarded with evil." Wow. What a stark fairy tale to end this with. Jeez. But, you know, sometimes fairy tales are meant to help us remember that there are happy endings and hope. And sometimes fairy tales are meant to remind us that that's not always the case. Jeez. Well, I hope that you feel in some small way that you have been rewarded for your diligence in listening to these entries. We have concluded the readings for the Danish Fairy Tales. Hooray! I already know what I'm going to read next, and hopefully I will not be so long and spread out in my uploads to get that particular work completed. But I do thank you for joining me in this task. It has been a long time coming, and I'm very glad to have been able to go through this book with y'all. I hope that y'all were glad to go through it with me. So, y'all take care. Y'all have a great day, great night, great afternoon, great whatever temporal label would be appropriate to your situation, and hopefully I will be back on soon.